It might interest you to know that The Phantom Menace was actually the original script for the first Star Wars film.
Oh, I can believe
that
it.
he wrote in 1975.
I feel like I've heard that somewhere before, but you've just unlocked that memory for me.
Yeah, so if anything, he'd reversed back to his original position
Sure.
back before he wrote the first one. Dan, what did you make of it when you first saw it?
Well, I was a little bit more of a fan, and actually, when they knew that they were going to be doing the deal and doing the sequels, they brought back the original set of films to the cinema beforehand. So I'd gone and watched them all at the cinema beforehand. So I was already warmed up to this. Then the Phantom Menace came out, and it was a bit woo, wasn't it? I mean, it's a bit, it didn't quite sort of punch through. It was a lot more political, and I think it's one of those films that's better when you reflect on it backwards rather than you're sat there watching it. Because you're right, it is a clunky film to watch. The dialogue is clunky. I loved Attack of the Clones, the second one, and the third one was still pretty good. So I overall I did quite like them. But actually, I think there is a bit of a masterpiece there with the political story.
Great.
Because when you read, between the lines as to what was going on, I mean, there is a whole thing about the child safeguarding issues around Yoda, which I do want to come because look, he's got thousands of Jedi Masters in there. He's the head of the Order, who could be training those kids, and he's like, no, leave that to me, I'm doing it. And he's got this whole dungeon of little boys down there with those little Yoda sex chairs going around the outside, and even when Anakin gets there, he's like, no, these kids can't be saved, they're too damaged at this point. I mean, I'll come back to it, right? But there's so many, and don't even get me started on what they were doing to Padme before she became a queen. If you watch the deleted scenes, I'm telling you, it's rough, but it's a wonderful analogy of how politics actually work when you read between the lines.
What, your capital city is
Intergalactic
run
pedo
by...
ring. Well, it's a really good analogy of politics.
I will say, to second your point on the writing, Carl, for the Phantom Menace in particular, because I watched it again about a month ago, there's an emotional distance in the story in the Phantom Menace. It's very hard to get emotionally invested within the characters itself. However, I think that one thing that's important is that for some reason there's these people who do this Star Wars thing called the Machete Order, right, where they watch the films by cutting off the Phantom Menace at the beginning and starting with Attack of the Clones, because they go, oh, why do we need Anakin as a kid? Why do we need, it feels quite disconnected from the Attack of the Clones and from Revenge of the Sith.
As a full trilogy, they say that it doesn't have many plot points that carry on into the second.
I can see you wincing on it. This is just what they argue. This isn't my position. But I would argue that actually Phantom Menace is a fundamentally important film. Particularly, I'm not saying he's the best written character, but fundamentally Qui-Gon Jinn is a really important character because he represents the ideal of what a Jedi is supposed to be. That he's supposed to trust in the Force, he's supposed to trust in the higher power of the universe, whereas you look at all the other Jedi like Yoda and Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Obi-Wan falls to us eventually as well by sitting on the Jedi Council, that become so institutionally captured in a way that they become simply a puppet of the Republic's regime, that eventually, and Qui-Gon is above all of this. So I think it's fundamental that you see firsthand how a Jedi should be, and then you get two films of showing every way that the other Jedi in the story fail.
The two independent thinkers was Dooku and Qui-Gon. And Qui-Gon they pushed to the side. There was frequent references that he should have been on the Jedi Council for ability and skill and stuff, but he got pushed to the side. And Dooku got pushed out entirely, because if you ask too many questions about what's going on, right, you get shoved to the side.
And Qui-Gon's
Dooku's apprentice.
Exactly. It was interesting you say about the emotional disconnect. George Lucas purposefully wrote it with that detachment, and Qui-Gon Jinn... Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson played him a bit more sympathetic. So he got reprimanded by George Lucas for just putting his hand on Shami's shoulder in a scene, and he said, no, it's important we do that, because otherwise it seems that the Jedi are emotionally detached robots who are incapable of raising their Padawans, and I'm not looking like an absent father figure when I'm killed.
They were. They were that. I mean, these young boys, right, they took them... And this comes back to the worrying red flags about Yoda, right? Because Luke goes in The Empire Strikes Back, and he's like, what, 21, 22, something like that? Yoda looks at him. First thing he says is, you're too old, right? then in the Phantom Menace, right, Anakin comes before him, and he's 9.
Yeah.
And he looks at him, and what does he say? Too old. You beast. Right. So they get these boys, and it does say this in the whole script. They separate them like from birth, and they raise them completely isolatedly. So they've got basically no one to blow the whistle to. You know,
there are questions that surround this. I can see
massive safeguarding red flags.
When Palpatine says to Anakin, "You must break through the fog of lies the Jedi have created around you." So
you basically you saw that
see through your trauma.
I mean, it's definitely a cult. I mean, that's no question, right?
It's like Plato's guardians, isn't it? They purposely pry them away from their families, raise them communally, so that they're wedded to defending the state.
But there's also
I think
sort
there's
of religious,
something also platonic about the relationship that Dan's suggesting here as well.
But it's definitely a religious cult, the Jedi Order, right? Like, it's certainly a religious order that, like you say, has dubious child safeguarding questions surrounding it.
Many such cases.
I don't want to throw any shade on Connor's description of what happened at the beginning of this film, but actually, I can summarise it a little bit more concisely than this. It was when we got to see how corrupt the Republic was and how desperately it needed to fall. And also Padme puts out for the first time, which starts the other story arc with Anakin going.
She doesn't actually put out.
You do
she does.
A lot of Natalie Portman. In nice outfits.
That bit.
Do you know Lucas made that outfit himself?
Oh, good man.
He made the corset outfit himself. Also, all of the dialogue that they did when they were on Naboo and then later in the Colosseum was improvised because Lucas said, "I can't write romantic dialogue, you guys make it up." And so immediately Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen started flirting. They came up with the aggressive negotiations banter that they did a callback with, and apparently they both said, "Yeah, it got inappropriate really quickly."
Good on
and
him.
if you notice what had been happening in their relationship before then, is Padme had been putting Anakin through a series of shit tests before that.
Yes.
And every time he backed down, in that bloody cornfield, there was that scene where, and I want to come back to the whole corruption of the Republic. There was that whole scene where he's something like, I think this is the way that politics should work, and then she's like, oh, we do all that, and he's like straight away, oh, don't bullshit me, bitch. You don't do any of those things.
Yep.
Right, and you can just see the look on her face. It's like,
and it then smash cuts to them in the fireside at night, where she's in basically bondage gear coming onto it.
It does.
Yeah, no.
So the moment he passes,
going, oh, I could never. Oh, this would be so inappropriate.
The moment he passes the shit test, he gets laid.
Well, he literally says, democracy's gay, basically, womanly, and so we sit around talking. It's like, no, they should be made to agree. And so
she loves it.
Suddenly she's like, oh,
and then he comes back and he's like, oh, I just murdered a load of women and children. She's like, oh my god.
We can work it out, Anakin. It's like, oh my god.
And actually, Padme's got quite a dark story, especially when you watch the deleted scenes, because you know my whole point about taking Jedi as children.
I haven't seen the deleted scenes.
Are these real deleted scenes, or are you making this?
No.
I feel like you're making a lot of shit.
There are deleted scenes with Padme.
So not only the Jedi taken as child soldiers, but the whole clone army, and the whole clone army thing, that's wildly suspicious, right? So actually, you made this point to me in the kitchen once when we were talking about Rome. I mentioned the Marius reforms, and you said that was the end of Rome because you went from a citizen volunteer army to a professional army, right? So you're telling me that the Republic, with a population of like 50 quadrillion, something like that, they cannot field a citizen army. They have to grow child soldiers
in secret.
Yeah.
Well, the reason, and it gets expanded on in the Clone Wars series, which you should watch, is that they've installed programming in all of the clones so that when Sidious says execute Order 66, it's like the Manchurian candidates. It flips and they can turn on the Jedi.
Yeah. But it's a brilliant bit of manoeuvring by Palpatine to create these two sides in the war. One entirely made of a droid army
that can be then instantly deactivated when he's done with the Separatists.
And then the clones as well, who have this accelerated growth. And who
the Republic want destroyed anyway. Right, they want the clone army destroyed because it's like, this wasn't authorized. Who's behind this?
Right.
So you've got two armies that aren't sort of invested. The people of the Republic are not invested in. Right. So like, this is all sort of ethereal to them, and so, however, not their business. It's very clever.
All of this is a classic point. We must return to it soon, but I hadn't finished the Padme point. My point is, they had a whole load of child soldiers, but not only did they need that, they needed a child queen as well. So how corrupt is this whole set of institutions
Bit
But not
concerning.
only do you need child soldiers, but you need a child queen. Now, if you watch the deleted scenes, one of the things she talks about is how when she got first involved in the Young Politicians program, she had a romance with an older man, and they quite correctly
You're right. Yeah.
they quite
I've not
correctly
seen
chopped that out. So
haven't seen
what shit is going down in this republic that you need a
that
child
explain
queen
why-
to sign off on the stuff that's doing, who's been indoctrinated from birth, that you need child soldiers, and what's going on that when a 9-year-old turns up to go into, you know, Yoda's playroom, he looks at it and says, no, you're too old. I mean, seriously, what is going
also-
on? What is going on in that room that even a 9-year-old is going to go, Master Yoda, you want us to do what?
Does this explain as well why, if she's had inappropriate relations with older men when she was far too young, the second that she meets 9-year-old
Yeah,
Anakin, she
she's into
starts
him.
throwing googly eyes at him?
It's the Stone Toss comic of like, how did he possibly turn to the dark side? And just Padme's grabbing him. How old
Yeah,
are you?
yeah.
9.
Yeah, it's literally that.
As
So there's this trilogy. Is
So
actually-
Anakin
cycle
taking
of
over the
abuse.
Republic and putting it to rights suddenly looks a lot
There is
more.
there is a point to this. If
justified.
you
Yeah,
if you don't mind, just quickly, it's that, and anyone who says that Hayden Christensen wasn't a very good actor, you've been fact
No, he
checked
was
by
fine. He
psychologists,
was
right? In 2007, there was a psychologist called Dr. Eric Bouy from Toulouse in France, and he wrote that, compellingly, you can diagnose Anakin with borderline personality disorder, which means that he's got an anxious avoidant attachment style.
Met a man with BPD.
Very feminine. He's very violent. He lashes out when he feels like he's being abandoned, and that's usually inflicted by early childhood trauma. So not only is it scientifically proven, seems like your theory might be right, Dan.
Them putting Anakin on the council and not making him master is outrageous and unfair. It was an attempt to humiliate him because he didn't obey Mace Windu and Yoda. That's a great point as well.
this
Yeah.
is true.
That's a really great point. It's like, yeah, okay, you can come on the council, but you're not a Jedi master.
Well, another way of looking at it is that they didn't have sufficient dirt on him yet. They hadn't booked him in for a session with the younglings with their video cameras in the corners.
They didn't Epstein him. Yeah.
So they didn't have the dirt to let him on the council.
And I think they knew that he never would have gone for that anyway.
Probably, yeah.
Incorruptible.
Yeah. But that is a really fascinating, because it is literally public humiliation of Anakin Skywalker.
I genuinely think Anakin Skywalker is one of the greatest characters.
He's much
There
more-
is so much complexity in
He's a very
Anakin's
sympathetic character.
Hayden Christensen, you were done completely dirty by the press in the early 2000s. Thank you for my childhood.
He was good.
Agreed.
If you would like to see the full version of this premium video, please head over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to gain full access to all of our premium content.